Hi guys. How are you? How's your weekend? Hope you guys had a good weekend. Mine was pretty busy, but oh no, I hope you feel better. I think I'm a little sick too. I think everyone at my school is sick, but that's okay. Not very fun being sick, but I'm really glad that it's fall now. We're just gonna wait like one more minute for more people to get here, and then we'll get started. Um, in the meantime, you guys can open up a new Replit so you guys can take notes or write your code in there for this class. So let's open a Replit together. So create REPL Python and let's name it week 4. Okay, we'll just leave the Replit as is for now, and we'll add to it really soon. Okay, so let's get started. We have quite a lot of information today, so buckle your seatbelts. We're going to learn about lists, for loops, and functions. First of all, we have lists. So the logic of a list is when you want to, for example, you ask a friend their favorite color and they respond with blue, green, and yellow. We want to store this data in we could store it in 3 different variables, but for a more organized way, we could always put it in a list. Okay, so basically this is just multiple pieces of information in one structure. So in this example, the person's favorite colors are put in this one list. We always have the name of a list with square brackets or hard brackets, and we have our elements inside the list with commas between each element. So something to note is that most of the time you will see lists with the same data type, like they're all strings or they're all integers, but they can have different data types in a list. It can also be as long or as short as you like it. It can also have nothing in it. So we'll learn about how we'll implement that. Okay, so now let's open up a new Replit or use the one that you just opened. And let's make a list with at least 4 elements about your favorite snacks, and then print the list and do the same with your favorite numbers. So I'll give you guys 1 minute until 04, and then we'll go over one way to do it and we can share. I guess 05 since it's now 04. All right, hopefully you guys have at least one list down. So first, to start with the list, we must give a name for this list. So let's call it fave snacks. Now, we want hard brackets. We don't want normal parentheses, we want hard brackets. And what are some favorite snacks? I'll just put goldfish, hockey, doesn't really matter. And let's just put one more. So this is the list, and to print the list, all we have to do is call it by its variable name, which is fave snacks. So let's print it to see what happens. So we have the list all printed out with brackets and quotation marks. Same thing about favorite numbers. I'm not going to do that, but I think you guys understand it. So now we're going to learn about indexes. So every list has an index. This is the way we can access or redefine an element of a list by using its index. So the index is a number that is the position of the element that an element is in. So every element has an index. So index values always start at 0 and count up. So in the example, if we have a list with the elements 80, 92, 91, 60, and 88, every element has an index. So we always start at 0. So the first element of the list, it has an index value of 0. And then we count up. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the way until the list ends. Okay. So now let's think about this example. So if we have a list called My Grades, and it has someone's grades inside a list, what is the, okay, I think this is a little off, but what is the index value of 99 in My Grades? Any guesses? Yeah, Bing or anyone?
0.
Yep, 0, that is correct. So I think you guys get it, it just counts out from 0. And now we'll see how to use these indexes. To access an element of a list, we must use its index, like I said. So to get a certain element inside a list, we will type the name of the list, hard brackets, and the index value of the element. So here we have print fave colors with an index value of 0. So the output would be green, because over here, put this here, we have a list. We know that the index value of 0, that the element that corresponds to 0 is green. So we will print green. Common mistake is trying to access the first element by using an index of 1. So just remember that the first index is always 0. So now let's go back to our REPL and do some practice. So first, using what we just learned about accessing elements, let's print the 5th element of My Grades, which is in green down here. Then print 94 using what we just learned about accessing elements. So let's do that on our REPL. Make sure to copy and paste this list into your program, or else if you try to access it without the list, it won't work. So copy and paste My Grades. And let's try to answer those two questions. 8:12 will reconvene. Okay, great. So, we have to print the fifth element of the list. So let's do that here. So the fifth element. So one way to do it, let's assign a variable. So call this variable fifth element, for example. And how do we access an element of a list? We must call the list by its name and put hard brackets, square brackets around the element. So my grades with an index of 5. So now if we print fifth element, we will get the fifth element of the list. Let's see if that works. 102. So let's count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's correct. So now let's print 94. So basically the same thing, but flip-flop the logic. So 94. Let's count the index value of 94. So we count from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 94 has an index value of 7. So we can print, we want to first call the list by its name, which is my grades, and square brackets around the 7th element, which we know is 94. So now we get 102 and 94. Perfect. So I'm just going to copy and paste this into the slide. So if you want to go back for reference. So now we're going to talk about reassigning elements of an array. An array is basically the same thing as a list for now. Similar to how we can access elements of the list using an index, we can also use the index to reassign certain elements. We can change the values of any element in the list however we want. To do this, we have to call the list by its name. So fave colors, if we're using that list, square brackets around the index value that you want to change, and it's going to equal the new value. So we have the name of the list, square brackets, the index value that we want to change, and make it equal the new value that we want. Okay, so now let's go back to our REPL and think about this. If we had the same list as before called my grades, if these are my current grades, we have a situation where my grade of 100 now drops to a 99. So let's change the value of 100 to 99 instead. So remember, this is how we, it's too big. This is how we reassign an element of a list. So let's sort of use that syntax and apply it to my grades. So 817, we'll talk about it. Kennedy says, when I did it, nothing changed. So Kennedy, do you mind copying and pasting your code into the chat so we can look at it? I'll also go over how to do it, So let's first talk about one solution of completing this. So to change a value, we have to call the list my grades. We have to write it again. And let's find the index. The index is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. And make that equal to the new value, which is 99. So now let's print my grades and see what happens. So now there's no longer 100 in the list. Instead, we have a 99 right here. Kennedy did my grades with square brackets 4 equals 99. That should be right. That's the same thing as I did. Just make sure you print my grades. Right, so what you're doing looks exactly like my code. Yes, you have to print it again to see the new value pop up in the list. So I'm sure if you print my grades, the 100 will change to 99. Yep. Good job, Jacob. Thanks for sharing your code. So these are the answers. Now we're going to talk about a common index error that often happens when you're working with lists and indexes. So something that happens is an error is called index out of bounds. So index out of bounds means that you can sort of imply it from the name, but means that the index that you're trying to find is located outside of the bounds of the list. So if you look at the example, we have favorite colors equals purple, green, and blue. If we want to print the index value of 5 in favorite colors, we will have an error because the index value of 5 does not exist. It only goes from 0, 1, and 2. So then we will have an error. But now you know that you know what this error means, and you can change your code to have a correct index value. All right. So now here are some list methods that we can use when changing values of a list. So essentially a method is something that changes the list or varies it in some way. So there's a ton of these methods that add a number to the list or sort it or reverse it, etc. And it might be hard to keep track of all of them, but you might want to write down these common 5. These are some that you'll be working with and seeing more often, but you can always Google something that you want to look for, and Google will always help you. So let's look at these common 5 changes to a list. These you might want to memorize or sort of keep in the back of your head. So the first one, we can append. Append means that we're going to add a new element to the end of the list. So, and then we have sort. We're going to sort the items in the list. Sort might be a little complicated if you have a string or a string and an integer, because the values in your list must be comparable in some way. But you can always play around with how that works. Then we have reverse. We will reverse the items of the list. So if we had like 1, 2, 3, 4, if I have list.reverse, it will now change into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. List.index x, it will find the index of the first occurrence of x. And then list.count returns the number of times x exists in the list. So you can always change the value of x to whatever value that you want. And the syntax must be exactly like this. If you're missing a parentheses, if you're missing a period, it won't work. So notice how some of them have a value inside the parentheses while some of them don't. So now let's do some practice with these methods. So first, I want you to declare a new list with your own elements inside. It can be any sort of elements you want. Then we're going to add a new value to the list using one of these methods. Second, we're going to count the number of times a certain value exists in the list. So you can make the certain value whatever you want. Whatever you want. And third, we're going to reverse the list. So all of these can be done using what we just learned in the picture. So remember, first step, we're going to make your own list. So let's work until 8:25, or if you need more time, or if you're done. If you're done, just send something in the chat so I know and we can keep track. If you need any help or have some sort of bug, you can unmute, or in the chat you can ask. Let's give it some more time. Looks like people aren't very done yet. And just to be clear, guys, if you didn't already think about this, in the methods it says list.append or list.sort. It won't always be list. List is going to be the name of your list, right? So if you have a list named like my pets, then you're going to put my pets.append or my pets.reverse. How are we on this little practice? Are we good? Are we almost done? Great job, guys. I'm seeing some really great work in the chat. We're going to look at all of your responses that you put in the chat. How does sort work? So let's test that out, So let's call my list sorting. And let's give it some random number values, because numbers are generally easier to sort. So let's see how it works. Sorting.sort. And now let's print sorting again. Let's see. Aha. So looks like if we have numeric values inside our list, Python will sort it from least to greatest. That is a great question. So let's see if sorting works for if we have words. So if we have sorting 2, and let's put some words inside. We have cat and something that starts with Z, and Kit Kat, and let's do sorting 2 dot sort. Print sorting 2. We have to print our list again to see if we have any result. Oh, so on the right, we have cat, Kit Kat, and ZZZ. So it looks like we sorted the values by alphabetical order. So for a number, it will sort it from least to greatest. For things that are not numbers, like words or text, it will sort it in alphabetical order. Great. So now let's go over the answers and see how they compare to what you guys thought of. All right. So let's make a new list for this case. What should we store in the list? Let's see. Let's call our list sports. And let's put some sports in. I play tennis, so tennis. I used to dance. I used to figure skate too. And let's just put some other ones like basketball and soccer. All right, so number one, we are asked to add a new value to the list. So we know that if we want to add a new value, we must append. So sports dot append our new value. Let's add lacrosse. Now we're going to print sports just to see if lacrosse actually got added. Let's see what happens. All right, so now we have our original values plus lacrosse. Perf. So now let's count the number of times a certain value occurs. So, for the sake of the example, let's have there be 2 soccers. And we're going to count sports.count. Let's say we're gonna count soccer, the number of times soccer occurs. And for this case, we cannot just print sports again. We must print this value. Let's see, great. So we get that sports or soccer occurs 2 times. Blank times, just to have it more clear. Let's see. Uh-oh. It says invalid syntax, perhaps you forgot a comma. Yep, I did forget a comma. Great, soccer occurs 2 times. All right, so now let's reverse the list. Sports dot reverse, print sports again, and now the whole list will be flip-flopped. Just like that. Okay. So yes, if you have both letters and numbers, it might work a little differently, but most of the times your list, if you want to sort a list, your list probably won't have both letters and numbers, but feel free to test that out. Great job to everyone who sent their code. It all looks pretty good. Let's take a look at Kennedy's. So count isn't really working. I'm gonna copy and paste these. We have favorite numbers, good, looking good. Favorite numbers.count of 2 and print favorite numbers. Okay, so thanks, Jacob. This is really helpful. So you guys can copy this for a little like cheat sheet. Thank you. So for Kennedy's code, looks like we're doing count right? And it looks like everything is right, but the thing is, when we print favorite numbers, in reality, the list itself does not change. Unlike reversing or adding something to a list where the list does change, when we count a number, the list itself doesn't change. This is a method, a function to find the number of times something occurs. So if we call this times of num, let's say we assign it to a variable called times of num. We want to print times of num. This way, we will get the actual value that that 2 occurs 2 times. So it's important here to think about the logic of the methods. So when we're counting, right, if you think about it, we're not changing the list, we're just finding the number of times something occurs. So now let's talk about, let's skip the slide. You guys can read it on your own after. So not that important. Now let's move on to for loops. For loops are super, super common. The second type of loop in Python is a for loop. So for a for loop, we are looping through a iterable piece of data, like a string or a list, with one element at a time. So here is an example. We have for element in favorite colors, print element. So essentially what this is doing here, so this example, the computer is thinking for every element in the list favorite colors, we're going to loop through it and we're going to print it. So the computer is first thinking, okay, let's start with the first value of favorite colors. So the first value is purple. So element is going to be equal to purple, and we're going to print purple. And then the loop is done for purple, and it's going to move on and go to the second value in the list. The second value is green, so it's going to do the same thing in the loop. It's going to print green, and then it's going to loop again, it's going to print blue. So we can also use a loop for a string. So what values can we for loop through? We can for loop through strings and lists. So these are the only values that we can for loop through. So how would this look? For x in banana, print x. So notice that the value for x or element can be anything. So does anyone have any guesses, predictions on what we'll print for this for loop? Unmute or put in the chat. Might be a little tricky, but think about what we're looping through and what happens when we loop through it. Yeah, Jason?
We'll print every letter in banana.
Yep, perfect. Nice job. So it will print B-N-B-A-N-A-N-A. So it's going to loop through every single character in the string. It's going to print it. So to get more fancy with for loops, we can specify the number of times this is run. So we can have the range function. It returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0, and it's going to increment by 1 and end at a specific number. So if we have for x in range of 6, we're going to print x. Do you have a question, Bingche? Oh, okay. I thought you were raising your hand. Okay, so basically for this, we're going to start from 0. We always start from 0, and we're going to print all the way to 5. So even if we say in range 6, we're going to print we're going to print the number that is less than 6. It's going to print to 5. So by default, it is going to start at 0, but we can also specify it to start at a specific value by adding another parameter. So in range 2, 6, this means that we're going to start from 6 and start from 2 and loop through all the way until we get to 6, but not including 6. So here, for x in range of 2 and 6, so meaning for every value that is in between 2 and 6, we're going to print this value. It's going to print 2, 3, 4, and 5. So these are important things to write down if you're taking notes, or we'll be using the in range a lot, and it's going to be really helpful. And it's going to come in handy in future projects or what you're doing. So another way of making it more fancy, we can change the number of times, we can change the value that it increments by. So by default, it's going to add 1 every time, but we can change it to any number that we want to add to. So in this code on the bottom, for x in range 2, 30, 3, remember we're going to start at 2 and end at 30. And the last part of the parentheses is how much we're going to add by each time. Start at 2, end at 30, and we're going to increment by 3 each time the loop runs. So we start at 2 and we add 3 each time, and we're going to print it. So we get like 2, 5, 8, 11, all the way to 29. So like I said before, note that this variable right here can be any variable. It can be X or I or element or word, etc. But most commonly it is I. So don't be surprised if some type of code changes the value for X in range or for Y in range. Now we're going to talk about nested loops. So this is a loop inside of a loop. So as you guys might recall, we learned about nested if statements. So we have an if statement inside an if statement. So I think you guys might have used that in your rock, paper, scissors project, which was last week. And so basically we can also have nested loops for loops. This is a bit trickier and a bit harder to visualize in your head, but the inner loop will be executed 1 time for every loop of the outer loop. So let's take a look at what will happen here. So let's all copy and paste this code on slide 32 into our Replit to see what happens. So the code has 2 lists. It has a list called ADG for adjectives and a list for fruits. So for X in adjective, and then inside of it we have for Y in fruits, print X, Y. So basically what this is saying, we're going to, for X in adjective, so we're going to start with the first value in adjective. So the first value is red. And then we're going to loop through the second loop. So for Y in fruits. So what is the first value in fruits? First value in fruits is apple. And then we are printing X, Y. So we know that X is red and Y is apple. So we get red apple for the first one. And then for number 2, we are looping through the inner loop again. So X is still red, but we're changing the value of Y. So what is the next value in fruits? It is banana, so we're going to print X, Y, which is red, banana. And now we do the same thing with cherry. We get red cherry. And let's run it and see what happens. We get red apple, red banana, red cherry, and some more. So basically we are looping through the inner loop and then looping through the outer loop. So this may get a little complicated to think about, but this won't be used that often, but it is a good thing to know and understand. Okay, so now let's talk about functions. A function is when we want to group something related into one portion of code. So we will use functions when we want to avoid copy and pasting, or if we want to make the code look neater and more organized. Essentially, a function is a way to format the code and to make it more accessible and easier to read and work with. Something like a keyword to note is that executing the code is what we call calling the function. So whenever I say we're going to call the function, we are going to basically execute the code. Okay, so an example, we always have to have the word def which is short for defining or define. Whenever we want to define a function, we have to start with def, and the function name. So the function name is print name and color. Function name. So we will print def, the function name, with parentheses, and you can put whatever you want inside your function. It can be as short like this, or it can be as long and complicated as you want. So we have defined our function. We have def, print name and color, and some stuff inside of it. Now, if we don't call the function, if we don't do anything after that, nothing will happen with our code. We must call a function. If you don't call a function by its name, the program will do nothing. So by calling a function, I mean we're just going to write the function's name with parentheses. So print name and color. The output would be, my name is Lucas and my favorite color is green. So some parameters that we can use to give our function different pieces of data. So we can have some inputs. We can ask the user to, we can sort of customize our function. So again, we basically have the same lines of code, except we want to def, the name of the function. Now, instead of the parentheses being empty, we have variables called name and color. So these variables here, we can use name and color inside our function for some customization. So print my name is variable name, and print my favorite color is variable color. So when we call a function, we must call it with its parameters. Print name and color, Lucas and green. So the output would be the same since we also have Lucas and green. So let's try this out. Let's basically write the same thing on the slide. Can you use an input statement, input value? I think you can. Let's try it out. So first, when we define a function, we have to have def. Ooh, I see what you're saying. Let's first create our function, and then let's add what you put in the chat. Def, let's call this name. Name with parentheses. Okay. So now let's print my name is input with an exclamation mark. So if we run this program, it would do nothing because we have not called the function. We have to call the function. So name with parentheses. We have to have the same thing here as we do here. Unless we have parameters and we're going to change like Lucas in green. So now let's run. It looks like our code is loading because nothing is happening right now. So why might this be? Let us remove the input statement for 1 second and see what happens. My name is, for example. Now let's run it. Now it is printed. It says my name is blah blah blah. So the input statement does not work inside a print statement. You must have an individual input statement. So if you wanted to ask the user for their name, one way you could do it is like this. You can insert your function. The first thing we're going to do is have an input value. So let's call this your name equals input. Please enter your name. Now we can incorporate your name into a print statement. Print my name or your name is your name with an exclamation mark. So now let's call our function and see what happens. Let's run the program. Please enter your name. Your name is Claire. So it does work in this way. This is one way that you can do it. So now let's add parameters here, like variables inside the parentheses, and see how that changes things. Let's change the name of our function to something more fitting. Let's call it intros. So if we add parameters like, we have to give variables inside the parentheses. So define def intros. Let's say, let's not do name and color. Let's do something else. Let's do age and grade. So let's keep the input statement. I really like that idea. And now let's print your name. So it's going to print whatever the user enters, your name. Hello. And you are blank years old. So we know that age is the variable that we're going to use. You are age, years old, and you are in grade. Let's say you are in grade. So, everything looks right. Am I right? But we see this little red line underneath here. If you run the code, it'll throw an error. So it says missing 2 required positional arguments. So right here, if you have variables or parameters right here, we must also include them when you call the function. So let's say my name or my age is 15. So let's have 15 and my grade is 10. So now let's run it and see. Enter your name. Claire, hello, you are 15 years old and you are in grade 10. That is all correct information, and our code is also correct. So as you can see, you could also just print this, right? But when you have more complicated code and as you have longer projects, it might get a little hard to read. Or if you want to call something multiple times, you don't want to do lots of copy and pasting. Instead, you could just call the function like this. functions are something that you might not use, but they are something good to know because as you move on, you might use them in harder contexts. So I'm going to copy and paste the code that we just wrote onto the slides so you can take a look at it on your own. Right here. That's pretty cool, right? So now let's talk about scope. Scope is basically just the variable that is defined within the function cannot be accessed outside of the function. So right here, the code at the bottom will throw an error. Error will occur because we are trying to print the variable favorite sport outside of the function. So the variable, any variable inside the function cannot be taken out and used somewhere else that is outside. So now let's talk about homework. Homework, there is this practice that you can fork the REPL of. If it loads. So these are using for loops mostly. And there's the rock, paper, scissors project that we did last week. And we also have a coin flip tosser, so something more fun. So I recommend you go through these and try your best on these practices. They're good for recollection of what we just learned. I haven't made the answer key for this, but if you want to see any answers, you can email me. So extra practice, here are some Python math projects. There's like 20 of them here, so if you have free time and you want to practice, these are really good for practice, and I recommend you guys do these. Okay. Kennedy put a code into the chat. Thank you for that. Let's take a look. Define intros with age. Please enter your age. Hello, you are 8 years old and you are in 10th grade. Great. Basically, the only problem is that when you call the function, it can't be inside the function, right? You have to delete the tab here. And also you're missing an argument, so you must put an age in here. So I could put like 98, right? I have to have something that matches. If I have intros with age here, I must also have something inside the parentheses when I call it. So let's just put 9 for. Also, something to note that this line where you ask the user for their age, it does not really affect your code. It doesn't really do anything. Because you are taking the age over here, and this input isn't used in your function. So if I call this a different variable to make it more clear, I have age 2. I want to print age 2. Age and age 2 are completely different variables. So let's see how that works. So please enter your age. Let's say I put 100. It still says, hello, you are 9 years old and you are in the 10th grade. Because the 9 is coming from your code over here, but your input is something that you don't use, right? So just play around when you use like functions. Personally, I don't use functions that often unless I'm working on a really long, big, heavy project. But just FYI. So I highly recommend you do the practice homework and the math extra projects. And project time. We did a rock, paper, scissors last week. I hope you guys completed that because it's something fun to share with your family. And now we're going to do a guessing game. So you can fork this REPL as a template. It has some instructions on how you can get started. And so we want to, the computer is going to generate a random number, but we're not going to tell the user, and the user is going to guess a number between 1 through 50, for example. And we're going to tell the user if you're too high or if you're too low, or if you're just right. So this is really fun. I think almost everyone who learns Python that I know of have done this guessing game. It's not that complicated. In my opinion, it's not as complicated as last week's projects, the rock, paper, scissors. So if you're stuck, you can always see Google for help, or email me or put something in the classroom. And here is one way that I did this game. You can also fork this game and play it. So I hope you guys try this on your own before looking at the solution. So just for funsies, let's play this game. All right, try to guess the random number 1 through 100. Any guesses? Unmute anyone? I don't know the number either.
50.
50, let's go 50. Guess is too low. All right,
75.
76. All right. Oops, 76. Too low. Let's do 82. My guess is also too low.
90.
90. Also too low. 99, says Kennedy. Too high.
95.
95. I like that. Too high, so we must go lower than
93.
93. Yes, you guessed the random number. So now I can choose if I want to play again. If I play again, then it'll choose a different number for me. So I guess it's pretty fun. You guys can share it with your family if you're finished. And hopefully you guys customize it and actually work on it on your own before looking at my code. And some fun things to incorporate, you could add a timer. So it will tell the user, for example, oh, you took 20 seconds to guess the number. Or you can also add the number of tries that it took. You can have a variable that counts the number of times that you guess, and it'll print, okay, good job. It took you 7 guesses to guess the number. So I encourage you to do the practice and the project. So that is all for today. Good question asking. You guys did really good today. They were complicated topics. All right, that's all I have. So I look forward to seeing your guessing games. I hope you guys see you next week. If you have any questions, stick around. Bye.